everyone, it's Rex Luna here, and before I get into my usual intro of what this video is going to be, this is obviously a little bit different, and the reason is I was editing this video and was throwing in the intro sequence and realized that I unfortunately recorded it with no audio, and I recorded it like after I finished it, so I looked like what I was supposed to look like at the end of the video, that whole shebang. And so went to go record another one, and I'm trying a different software. Long story short, audio's just been a bad time, so I just threw my headset on because I know that this works and recorded a different intro. So I apologize for everything looking totally different, sounding different. It might be a little jarring to switch to the next scene, but anyway. So I'm starting a new series, probably a pretty short one. It's just going to be all about basic makeup techniques, and this particular one will be all about complexion, which is foundations and blush and all that fun stuff that happens on your face. And it's going to be hopefully simple, hopefully easy to understand. I know I do tend to talk a lot, obviously, but this can be used for all the time makeup or special occasion makeup or cosplay stuff. It's really just giving you a base to start with for those of you who just have no idea where to start. And I'll do other videos about eyebrows and eyeshadows and lips and all that fun stuff later, and possibly do a video about my favorite products and maybe just a little more information, not so much a tutorial on application. So without rambling any further, let's start the video.
So first things first, you just want to make sure you have a clean face and clean hands, and then get your hair or your wig or whatever out of your face before you start. Doing the best I can right now as my hair is growing out, so it's at a kind of awkward length. So the first step is going to be to prime, and primers come in a few different varieties, but I'm not going to go too into it because that just gets complicated. But all you really need to know is that primers will give your makeup a better base to start with, and it will help it stay on a lot longer. And it usually addresses a certain concern. So here's an example. I have a trial size of the Professional Primer by Benefit, which is one of the most popular ones out there right now. And this is to help reduce the appearance of pores. Now, I have oily skin, so what I like to use is this Smashbox Primer Water. It's like really hard to read because it's clear. It's a primer water, and it's water-based, which is why it's called primer water. And for me, that's fantastic, because anything that's too lotiony or oily either makes me break out or makes me feel gross. So this is what I like to use, and just for the sake of showing you what I'm doing, with the spray ones, you keep them far back, usually about 6 to 8 inches, and then just spray it all over, and try not to make a silly face. So I've let the primer set and dry, which you'll want to do regardless of what you're using. Just give it a good 30 seconds to a minute, maybe longer depending on the product. So you'll pretty much be able to tell if it's dry. Like, it's dry. There's a light stickiness to my skin, which is good because it's to help everything stick. And this will just make it so that when you're putting product on top of this, they don't mix around. Like, you have a good base to start with that isn't just getting patchy. So this next step can go in a few different ways, but it's going to be your tinted liquid product, which comes in a variety of formulas. So I'll just break it down into 2 simple versions, which is a tinted moisturizer or a full-on foundation. So tinted moisturizers are kind of self-explanatory. A lot of the time they're made by a skincare brand where you'll get the benefits from that skincare line, but it will also be tinted and you will be able to use it as a cover-up or foundation. Where a foundation doesn't usually give you a ton of skincare benefits. Some brands will have certain ingredients that will do so, but it's usually meant to be more full coverage. So a tinted moisturizer usually is a lighter to medium, and then most foundations are medium to full, which just specifies either how thick or how pigmented the foundation is. So if your skin is like super awesome, you can go with a light coverage foundation, or a medium if you really want to go for something super flawless. But if your skin's not awesome, like mine can sometimes not be awesome, if my redness is really bad, or if I have a lot of blemishes, or my dark circles are out of control, I want to use a foundation because it's going to be more pigmented and it's going to do a better job of covering it up. But since I do have oily skin, I prefer lighter coverage foundations just because I don't feel as clogged. But a lot of that's personal preference. So this is the BB cream I like to use, because I do have oily skin and I do tend to get a lot of blemishes. You can kind of see I don't get like crazy breakouts, but I get some. This does really help, and it's actually pretty close to a medium, almost a full coverage BB cream, but it's very liquidy. It's awesome. I get it in the light shade. And one of the foundations I tend to go for, especially for cosplay, if I want to do something more full coverage, is the Too Faced Born This Way foundation. This one's actually really good if your skin is drier, because it has, I believe it was a coconut water inside of this, so it kind of helps retain the moisture. So this is really good to use for myself in winter time. So even though my skin's oily, it will still dry out, but this definitely prevented that. So today I'll be using BB cream just because that's what I wear almost all the time. So regardless of what you're using, the application's basically going to be the same. You'll always want to make sure that it's mixed, and the more liquidy it is, the more you want it to be mixed because it's more likely to separate. So this one is very watery. But I like to pour some on the back of my hand just to kind of use as a palette to pick it up with my brush, because if you pour it onto your brush or onto your sponge, sometimes it'll absorb too much of the product, and then when you're washing it later, it's going to take you forever. So just pour a little on here, a few drops. So I just like using the Sephora brand full coverage airbrush foundation brush, which is number 53 Pro. Just a big fan one. It works pretty well for liquid foundations. But there's also times where I use the Urban Decay optical blurring brush. It's nice and fluffy. And I've used both of these brushes with normal foundations and BB cream. It's really kind of up to preference. This one tends to help spread it around a little bit better, so I just like to use this more often. So just tap it on there. And I like to do buffing motions around the whole face, and then I'll go in and detail like under the eyes and stuff a little bit after. So you'll of course want to let this sit for a little bit, just like you did with the primers. Make sure everything is dry and in place. You might notice I went a little bit down past the edge of my jaw. I went down my neck a little bit. And there's a couple reasons for that. If your foundation doesn't match super perfectly, blending it down into the neck will help with that. That way when you see the edge of your jaw and your neck, they're the same color, because sometimes if you just put foundation here, you can see there's a very clear difference in your skin tones, and that'll just make your face pop out. Not necessarily in a way you'd want. But the other reason is when you're doing contouring, you'll oftentimes, especially for cosplay and photos, you'll want to contour under the jaw just to make sure that this shadow is still visible with flash or sunlight. So if you have a foundation down there already, putting the powder on top is going to allow it to stick a little bit better. So the next step is going to be your concealer, and this will help cover up any blemishes or dark spots, discoloration, dark circles, any of that kind of stuff, just to give your skin a more even tone and complexion. So I use the Sephora brand, what's they call it? Gel Serum Concealer in the shade 3, which is fondant. And I just dab this on the areas I need it, which is always under the eyes. Occasionally I have to do certain blemishes, and then I do it around the corners of my nose just because I have some darkness and weird skin stuff going on. And in this case you want to blend with your fingers, but that's specifically just the way this is formulated, and the way that the applicator works is meant to be blended with the fingers. But with other concealers you can easily use a brush or a sponge, or you can still use your fingers if you want. So just kind of dab it on. And since I'm going more for the dark circles, I really just want the spots under here, and then I'll blend what's left over closer to the eyes, but the darkest spots are right here. I'm going to start with that so that this doesn't dry before I get to blending it. What I like to do after that is I just do a little bit of light blending just to make sure that the edges aren't too harsh, and I use the Sephora brand Pro Airbrush Concealer, which looks like this. It's number 57. This brush is honestly one of the best ones I own. It's so versatile. I can use it for a lot of different areas of the face and different types of concealers, and it always works really well. So I just kind of do light buffing motions. Don't want to be taking the concealer off. I just want to make sure it's blending. Alright, so once that's dry, you'll want to go on to a powder. And there's a couple different powders because, of course, nothing is ever crazy simple. There are tinted powders, like this little guy here, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's tinted, like the foundation. And there are ones that end up being translucent. So they're going to look white, like this guy here, but they're going to come out translucent. I personally like using the tinted powders, mostly because my skin has a lot of redness and discoloration, and any little extra boost I can give of pigment to cover it up is fine by me. So I like to use the Cocoa Powder Foundation by Too Faced in the color Fair, and this stuff smells like chocolate. No joke, smells like chocolate. Big selling point for me. It's also super soft. So I just get a big fluffy brush. This one happens to be the... Honestly, I think it's just called the Powder Foundation brush from Tarte. It doesn't say. But I just like using it. Something really fluffy, that way when I buff it on, I'm not getting a huge spot where there's a bunch of powder showing. You want it to look nice and natural. Just swirl it around the pan. There we go. Tap off the excess and do light buffing motions across the face. I do go in and pat in the areas that super need it. So I want to make sure that it mattifies around the nose where all my oil is, and I want to make sure it gets in all the crevices here to cover my concealer. Alright, so since this is powder, you don't have to let it dry, so you just go straight into the next step, which is anything that's going to add a little more color and dimension to your face, such as blush or bronzer or contouring, any of that stuff. So I'm just going to do basic blush and very basic contouring. This is what I do every single day. This is also what I do for cosplay. I don't do anything nuts. I always want it to look natural. I'm not carving my face out, so this is going to be super simple, hopefully easy to follow. I like to use this palette by Tarte. It's called Park Avenue Princess, but I believe it's their original one. And now they have a different one with different colors, but all you really need is a nice blush. And this one's actually really light, so it looks super natural on me. It doesn't necessarily look like I'm wearing blush, which is why I like it. And a nice matte brown shade to do the contouring. Usually this will depend on your skin undertone. So if you've got darker skin or warmer skin, you'll want something that's a little more gold, where those of us who are more fair skinned will want something a little bit more, I don't want to say ashy, but it is definitely a little more muted and more neutral. Alright, so for blush, I'm not super picky with my brushes because I always like to keep my blush really muted anyway, but I do happen to have the Urban Decay Flushed Blush Brush. That's a stupid bunch of words put together that are hard to say. But most blush brushes are going to be slanted like this, slanted and fluffy. Same reason with the foundation. You don't want to grab too much color and then have a big spot of pink on your face. You want it to be able to look natural and be able to blend. So I'm going to use the blush here, obviously. So the way you'll want to apply this, sometimes it can sound complicated, but I promise it's very simple. You'll want to find your cheekbone, which you can usually do by feeling, so mine's right here. It's about here. And you'll want it to be above the cheekbone. Not super high up on the highest point of your face, but you'll want it just above the cheekbone. Do it in a little bit of a strip right here, just above the cheekbone, all the way back to where your hairline is, just so that once you get your hair down in your face, it'll look a lot more natural. And I do a mix of buffing motions and sweeping motions, since this does have to go all the way back. But you will want most of the color concentrated right here, obviously. You don't want all the pink to be back here. So this is a perfectly acceptable place to stop your complexion. If you don't feel comfortable with contouring or using bronzer, this is a completely fine place to stop until you're a little more comfortable with it. But I'm going to move forward into that since that's what I do all the time anyway. Now for the contouring, you can use the same brush if you want, but there are tons of contour brushes out there. It can get a little bit intimidating, so I'm going to show you the one that I'm not one to say I love makeup products, but I do really love this brush. It just has made it so easy to do my contouring, and that's the Sephora Pro Contour Brush number 79. It's this tapered pointy brush, but it's nice and fluffy, and I always use this for my contouring. I can even sometimes use it for blush if I'm feeling lazy. It just works fantastic. So same kind of thing, using this brown color, swirl it around in there, tap off the excess, So I'm going to try and keep this simple. It is very simple, but I'm not necessarily the best at explaining it. So once again, you'll want to find your cheekbone, which is right here for me, and you'll want to apply this right underneath your cheekbone. You're basically just creating a shadow that should already exist, but if you're getting your picture taken, or if you're out in the bright sunlight, or under certain lights if you're shopping or whatever, it's going to kind of wash you out. So adding this shadow back onto your face just gives you a little more dimension so you're not as washed out. So it's nothing too crazy. You're not trying to change the shape of your face with this style of contouring. You're just accentuating what you already have so that it's not lost in translation. So same kind of thing, just go down here in sweeping motions. I always start with a very light touch just in case. Don't want to apply too much and get a super crazy carved out cheekbone. This is another thing you want to bring all the way back to the hairline just for the sake of it being natural. If you just had a shadow that started like right here, it would look a little unnatural. Alright, so you should be able to see just a little bit of light shadow right here from the contouring, nothing crazy. Incidentally, it is showing up better on this side than this side, but I think that's more to do with the quality of this recording than it is about the contouring itself. So once again, this is an acceptable place to stop. This is like what I would consider to be the bare minimum of contouring, is just having your cheeks done. But you can also do other parts of your face. Popular thing to do is the nose, but in truth, I'm not very good at it. And also, I have a very narrow nose, which makes it very difficult to do anyway. What I want to do is get rid of the length of my nose, not make it thinner, so there's nothing really for me to do. But I do go along the edges of the face because naturally, your skin is not all one color. Most of the time, like in a perfect situation, you have the lighter skin here and it's going to be darker around the edges. And it's not usually terribly noticeable, but once you remove all of that, sometimes it can be a little bit noticeable that it's just like your face pops out just a little too much. So doing this around the edges just kind of helps give that natural change of skin tone back. And once again, I do it very light, it's very subtle. I go along the hairline here. And I also go around the edges of my face on the sides here, simply because I have a wider face here because it's heart-shaped, and I kind of just tone it down a little bit. Then I'm going to go underneath the jaw, not on the jaw, but underneath on the neck. And I believe I mentioned this before, but this just helps if you're getting photos taken. Sometimes the flash will bounce off your neck, and then it just looks like you have no shadow there, and it can be kind of weird. So adding this little shadow in will help that not happen. I also get just right here on the edges of my jaw because I feel like it pops out a little bit more than I'd like, and this just kind of helps it look like it's receded a bit. So this is where I stop with my complexion, but there is another step you can take, which is highlighting. I just personally don't really like to do highlighting, partially because I'm already really fair skinned, so it's kind of hard to find a highlighter that shows up properly. A lot of the lighter highlighters tend to be sparkly, and I prefer having a matte complexion, partially because I have oily skin, so it's really nice to not have a greasy, shiny face. But here's an example of some highlighters. I actually have the Becca Champagne Glow palette from Holiday 2015. And these are 3 shades you can actually buy separately now from Becca, which is Pearl, Champagne Pop, and Blushed Copper. And this is to be used when you want to highlight the high points of your face. So you're contouring the low points of your face or bringing out the shadows that are naturally there. You're taking the natural highlights of your face and making them come out. So you would do it on the high points of your cheeks here. You would do it along the nose, on the forehead, the chin, and sometimes even on the cupid's bow, especially if you're wearing a bright lipstick. Kind of helps your lips pop out. Alright, so the absolute last step that you can do for your complexion, which I prefer to do, is a finishing step. This can be done one or both of 2 ways, depending on how long you want your makeup to stay on, or with trial and error. If one method doesn't work, but both of them work really well together, then you can do that. And that is to use a finishing powder. This particular one is from Tarte. It's their Smooth Operator. This one's their loose powder. There's also setting sprays. I don't own a specific setting spray, but this primer water I used before can also be used as a setting spray. So these finishing powders are translucent. They might look white or they might look slightly tinted in a lighter peach tone, but they will be translucent once they're on the skin. You apply it similar to how you would do with the foundation powder. In this case, this guy's really small because it's a trial size, so it's a little difficult to use, but you get the loose powder, swirl it around, and then just buff it all over the face. Since this is a loose powder, it does tend to get everywhere. I feel like the camera even picked that up. So it does tend to like make me make faces because it like gets in my eyes and nose. So then after the finishing powder, last step is setting spray. Do it the same way. Make sure it's far enough away, otherwise sometimes it can kind of make these weird spots. So just make sure that you keep it far enough away, but get enough mist on your face to set. Alright, so with that, the complexion is done. So the next step here would be doing eye makeup, lipstick, all that kind of fun stuff, but that's going to be for another video. Thanks for watching. Bye!